Good evening and welcome. It's Friday, it's 8 o'clock, and that means it's time for Buster's Virtual Jazz Club. That's right, we are live streaming on YouTube, live to infinity and beyond. Hope you've had a good week, and if you're there, do say hello in the chat box. Nice to know somebody's tuning in and I haven't screwed it up, and and this is actually going out. So welcome. Thank you to all my regular patrons who subscribe on my Patreon page, and also to everyone who makes a donation via PayPal and now Visa. We can now take one-off Visa payments as well. It means an awful lot, and it's been a massive help this year, and thank you for all the lovely messages you send me. I do read them all and love them all. It's very kind of you. Thank you very much. If you want to check the website below, please don't forget, have a look on there. You can see all of the last previous shows. We're actually on to show number 36 now, which is amazing. Plus, if you count the 13 previous incarnations of this show, this means we're up to show broadcast number 49, so that's quite a milestone we're going to be hitting soon next week with that. So yeah, you can watch all the past shows, and you can see who my upcoming guests will be. I've just fixed up the next few weeks. We've got some great guests coming up, and please also please do click the subscribe button on the YouTube page, as that will really help me out as well at the moment. So it's either there or it's there, depending on which way my screen is. So on to tonight's show. My guest this evening is a saxophonist, a woodwind player and a composer who is known as one of the UK's foremost exponents on the baritone saxophone. He studied at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London and has since worked extensively in the fields of jazz, commercial and classical music. He has played with many top UK jazz ensembles such as the big bands of John Dankworth, Stan Saltzman, Mike Garrick. He's played in Ginger Baker's Air Force Band, the Swing Out Sister Orchestra, the Sid Lawrence Orchestra, the London Philharmonic Orchestra, the English National Opera and the Scottish Chamber Orchestra. He has recently been recording and touring with Alan Barnes' Plus 11 group and Jim Rattigan's Ensemble Pavilion, and is currently a member of the Humphrey Lyttelton Band, the Back to Basic Orchestra and the London Jazz Orchestra. Other notable jazz musicians that he's worked with include Dame Cleo Lane, Jackie Dankworth, Trudy Kerr, Mark Lockhart, Guy Barker, Laura Jerd and Digby Fairweather, who's going to be on the show very soon. He has recorded 3 albums under his own name and is in demand as a session musician, having played for many film and TV soundtracks, including Prometheus, Vice and Downton Abbey. As a composer, he has written for various ensembles which include the London Jazz Orchestra, the Quartz Saxophone Quartet, the Docklands Symphonia and Onyx Brass, as well as his own jazz groups. His music has been broadcast on BBC Radio 3 and he has pieces published by Saxtet Publications, some of which are included in the ABRSM and Trinity College exam syllabuses. He is also active as an educator. He currently teaches at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, the Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Drama and Goldsmiths College, and he's a tutor for the National Youth Jazz Collective. And I'm very pleased to say he's here with us now live on YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the very wonderful Mr. Mick Foster. Hello mate, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks Buster. Thanks for asking me tonight. Lovely.
Oh, well, that's great. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for giving up your evening and sharing your music with us. You've selected some absolutely beautiful music, some fantastic tracks. There's a nice mix of stuff as well. So I'm looking forward to playing those. So thanks. That's great. What I usually like to start off with is asking people how the last year or more, as it is now, has been treating you, because it's been a very interesting time for all us musicians, and obviously not a lot of gigs about. Have you got anything coming up? Is it things are starting to unlock? Did you lose a lot of gigs at the original lockdown? I know there's an album that you've brought out as well, haven't you? That you recorded before. So what you've been keeping up to over this time?
That's right. Well, I mean, I think it was a shock for everyone, wasn't it, when we all locked down, when we shut down a year ago. And suddenly all the gigs really went out of the book. And it was like, I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of people. It was just like a set of dominoes going down, you know, and bring your diary in a rubber. That expression springs to mind, doesn't it? Except it actually happened. Yeah. So, you know, but I've been very lucky during the last year because I teach, as you've just said, I teach in a couple of places in London, and they've all kept going online. They've all been really proactive and kept going. So I've had the Zoom teaching, which has been great. We've been back in person this term, and we were back in person last September as well for a term. So we've been on and off a little bit there. I
do feel for the students, particularly this year. I mean, it's been awful for them, hasn't it? And of course, if it's that particularly the first year students, who their whole, that's such a moment, isn't it? Your first year music college, conservatoire, you've worked really hard to get in, and everything's building up to that great moment. You're going to meet all these other musicians, and of course, one of the most important things about being a music student at a conservatoire is playing together in ensembles and bands. And of course, they've not had any of that, have they? But you've managed to keep them going online, so that's good.
Kept them going. I mean, it was tough really for the final year students in the first lockdown, because they suddenly had to get used to recording and record their recitals, with
of course,
play along tracks and all that sort of thing. I mean, it was really difficult. Luckily, the new students actually came back in September, and a lot of it was face to face. Not all of it, but a lot of it was face to face. But of course, I mean, what do you do when you're a first year student? You meet other people, you meet your peers, you go out and have a drink or go down.
I remember doing quite a lot of that.
Exactly. I mean, it's all part of that experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so it's been a really tough year, I think, for the students.
Yeah.
But we've done what we can. We've kept going, and as I say, a lot of them have really got on top of the recording technology in a way that they wouldn't have done before.
We've all been learning new technological skills, haven't we? I mean, I wouldn't have dreamt I've been doing this, So
exactly, just like you have, Buster. I mean, you've been really innovative in doing all this and getting it all together. And here we are now doing a radio show that or a podcast that you might not have done before.
Absolutely.
So we've all learned new skills, But the other stuff, I mean, I've been doing some online recordings, some sessions have come in. I've got a little setup here, so I can record here. So I've been doing some of that. I've been doing writing. I compose, so I've been getting on with some of that, and I've enjoyed doing that. And as you say, yes, I brought an album out in October last year, which was a live album that we'd recorded at the Vortex before. I kind of got lucky with it because I often record gigs just to see if it works. And we
yourself, you set up some mics and things, or you get somebody to do it.
I've got a nice interface here, and it goes into an iPad. The reason I bought this one was because you can plug it into an iPad, so you can take it to the gig and just plug it into the iPad with a couple of nice mics, which I've got, and then you've got a good recording that you can take home and do stuff with. And I had this gig at the Vortex with my band, and I decided to record it in that way. And their sound engineer, Louis, at that time, was really intrigued by the fact that I was recording this onto an iPad.
Yeah.
So he said, "Mate, let me set up a few more mics. We'll plug them into and I'll engineer it for you," because he wanted to see if it all worked. So we got a full sort of recording rig up there, and did the gig. And luckily, it was a good gig. The gig went well. So come lockdown, I had this recording. And that's the perfect time then to get it out and release it, So I thought I'll do that.
And that was released in September 2020, right? Am I right?
Just October 2020.
So which just gone.
We kind of already planned to do it around about that time, but lockdown really sort of pushed it forward. To do all that.
And we're going to play some couple of tracks from that on the show, which is good, and they sound fantastic. And you've got a beautiful sound. It's really, it doesn't, I mean, at the end you hear that it's a live gig, but you wouldn't have thought so from the recording quality. It sounds like a studio kind of quality recording. And also, we should probably talk about the band. So this is a regular quartet. You've got musicians that you've worked with a fair bit now. One in particular for quite a while, I think, and we're going to talk about as well. So it's it must be nice having a regular band like that you feel that you can write for and work with as well. But it is hard keeping bands together, isn't it? And finding gigs and things like that. We know. So I suppose the planets aligned a bit for you on that night then to get this recording together. But obviously a lot of work goes in behind it. It's not just a fluke, is it? It's there's years and years of playing together, which really shows, I think, in your playing with this group. Is this how long have you had this group together?
This particular quartet I got together around about 2012 for the previous album, and actually we'd been doing one or two things before that, and they're a really flexible group of musicians. So we can do standards, we can do originals, can do all sorts of stuff with them, and that's one of the reasons I chose each of these musicians, actually, because they're so versatile and they can do so much with the music, and so that opens up the venues that you can play at, because as you know, certain venues like certain things in the UK jazz scene. Certain venues are more standards orientated, certain venues are more originals orientated, and anything in between. There's a real mix. I mean, my ideal gig is to do a really nice mix of originals and standards. That's what I like to go in here, and that's what I like to go and play. And the musicians in this band are all excellent. Absolutely. At that versatility. Actually, just while we talk about the sound quality, because Louis, who used to work at the Vortex, recorded this and recorded it to very high quality, and then it was also it was mastered by and mixed by a friend of mine, Simon Whiteside, who I work with, and he's in the media sort of film world, and he mastered and mixed that. So it's a combination of things, I think, that created that sound.
Well, let's play a track. So let's just name check. We've got Dominic Ashworth on the guitar, who's been on my show before, number 14, I believe, and we're going to hear some more of him later. So if you want to go back and check him out, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Farmer on the double bass, a very talented young bass player, of course, a very successful group, but a former student at Trinity, right? Trinity.
He was at Guildhall.
At the Guildhall. Oh, sorry. There we go. Yeah, I remember. Was he a student when you were teaching there? Then did you?
I actually did run a small band that he was in at the time. Yeah,
great.
He might remember that.
Yeah, and Tristan Malliot, a very, very versatile, very experienced drummer, fantastic player. So let's hear a bit of that. And this track you've selected for us is called Quinta Quinta, which I'm guessing is a reference to the time signature, is it?
I'm glad you spotted that, being a drummer. Yeah, absolutely.
And is this an original, Mick?
It is an original, yeah.
It's one of your tunes?
One of my tunes, yeah.
Fantastic. And this features you on the baritone saxophone?
That's right.
Here we go, Quinta Quinta. Yes, indeed, that was fantastic, Mick. Wonderful. That was recorded live at the Vortex, and from the new album called Live at the Vortex, featuring my guest Mick Foster with his own band, his quartet, with Dominic Ashworth, a fantastic Dominic Ashworth on guitars, Tom Farmer, wonderful bass player, and Tristan Mayo on the drums, ladies and gentlemen. And there's a few people in the chat box just going to say hello, so welcome everybody. If you're there, do say hello. Peter Gore's in the house. Steve Clark's on the Pinot Grigio this week for a change. Nice to hear you're enjoying that, Steve. Laurie, you're here. Lovely, Laurie. Nice to see you, Laurie. And Brian Way is tuned in from the green and rainy Normandy coast. Welcome, Brian. I see he said he really liked that tune. And Gilly Porter's in as well. She says hello, Mick, and she loves this track. Yeah, I can see why. Fantastic. Your music that you write with your band, you get a real kind of feel to. There's a certain feeling to it. I know you play a lot of. You've worked with all the top British kind of jazz groups and everything, and you do a lot of kind of mainstream playing, like you say as well. But your own compositions seem to have a lot of these other flavours in them as well. Dare I say, a little bit of a world kind of feel to that one as well. Is that a conscious thing, do you think, or do you feel that you've just soaked up a lot of things through all your different kind of areas of music that you've worked in?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't really know where that all comes from. It just sort of comes out. And so I've noticed that I do tend to write quite a lot of Latin-y tunes or tunes with straight eights, those sort of feels. And it just sort of seems to happen like that. I don't know. Maybe there's something in the DNA. I'll have to do one of those DNA tests.
Yeah, could be shocked. Yeah. I found out recently I was a 1/8 Scottish. We never even knew about it. Yeah. The last thing I'd expected, I always thought there was a bit of Italian or something in it, but it's apparently Scottish, yeah. You never know.
I'm definitely half Scottish.
Interesting.
Half Scottish. So I do know that much. But no, I mean, those influences are just sort of how you hear it sometimes.
Yeah, because that had a kind of tango sort of feel to that one, wasn't it? But you put that in 5, and so when you write a tune like that, there's obviously there's a very strong riff there. Is that something that does that pop in your head? And you think, I'm going to get that down and then finish the rest off? Is it something like that?
Something like that. Just a little hook or a melody. Sometimes it can be a melody. Sometimes it can be a hook. Sometimes it can be a chord sequence. It can be all sorts of things that gets you going. But I think with that one, it was just that little riff at the beginning. You might hear a bit, you might start to play it on the piano or on the saxophone, and then just start to follow it through and develop it. And then it's got you. Once you've got something, it's got you. And you've got to kind of keep going with it. The hardest thing sometimes is just starting, but once you've started and you've got something like that, then you have an urge to finish it, really. So that drives you through to sort of get to the end and finish the tune, do something with it. It's interesting, the process, really.
I'm very interested in the whole process, and I think people don't quite realise how that goes on. And there's quite different processes to it, aren't there? And I think a lot of it depends on context. For instance, you might be commissioned to write something, in which case there's a deadline, which is a great sort of incentive. Or sometimes there's musings, aren't there? And I think perhaps more so if you're writing for your own band and there's not that kind of demand to do something. It's just it's in some ways that's quite nicer, isn't it? You're freer, but then sometimes you don't have that. It's just you're kind of waiting for the thing to come, aren't you? Before you can do it.
Well, that's right. Well, sometimes you don't get on with it. I mean, I think it was. Yeah. I mean, we always rush around. But before lockdown, we were rushing around doing gigs and teaching and trying to fit everything in. As a composer, you often think, I wish I had a bit more time.
Yeah. No more excuses, is there, this year?
I could sit down and write and all that sort of stuff. But apparently, Duke Ellington said, I don't need time, I just need a deadline.
A deadline, yeah.
And I think that's absolutely right, because as soon as someone says, I need a tune a week on Tuesday, you're gonna have it ready. You're not gonna sit around waiting for it to come. It's gonna be something that you sit down, you work out, and it's gonna be there. So I think giving yourself a deadline or having a deadline is probably the most useful thing.
Yeah. I've only written a few things, and it's not something I find very natural. It's something I'm very interested in the process. But for me, for my books, I've composed some tunes for my books. But for me, that's made it a lot easier, because I've gone, right, I need a blues in this sort of style, and I'm writing something very much almost kind of pastiche, I guess, in a 2 order, and I found that I could do that, but in terms of just writing a tune. And what I find is I get ideas for things, and then I tend not to finish them off because I haven't got anyone to play them. I suppose if I had my own band, then I guess is that an incentive? Because you think, I want to hear this, I want to hear the band play this tune.
Definitely. I mean, if you've got the band, if you've got the people to play it, that's absolutely an incentive. And I often write. I usually write things actually for people in mind, because whether it's a classical thing or whether it's a jazz thing. you want to hear it. You want people to play it. And so if you know someone that might play it, then that's a good way of getting it played.
Yeah. And also that presumably if you know who you're writing it for, you find that affects how you write it as well? Is that which is the Duke Ellington thing, isn't it?
Very much so. I mean, if you know what people can do, you know how they sound. You presumably like how they sound if you ask them to be in your band, and so you consequently you write for them, and then it just makes much more sense because it's not an abstract thing; it's actually quite a specific thing.
Fantastic, yeah. Well, very good advice. So we're gonna play another track now from your first album, which was from 2000. But before we do that, I thought perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about how you got started. Did you come from a musical family? Was there a particular moment that you sort of discovered jazz, or was it a kind of gradual evolution? I know you went to the Guildhall, did your music degree there, and obviously that's a big moment. But perhaps prior to that, a little bit of how you got into this crazy business. I'm sure people would be interested to know.
Sure, yeah. Well, I started playing clarinet when I was about 8 years old. I come from a musical and artistic family, actually. My dad was a musician. Well, he wasn't a professional musician. He had a day job, but he was a very fine pianist. He could read music and he could play by ear. And so from that side, there was music in the family. My mum, who's hopefully watching this program, is an artist, a visual artist.
Hello, Mum.
And actually, I often use her images on my album covers. So
that's nice.
This one, that Live at the Vortex, uses one of her images, and another album that we're going to hear tonight uses one of her images. So I often use her pictures. That's nice. Lovely. It's a nice collaborative thing. So yeah, I come from a musical family. My brother's a musical director in Canada of shows. He works as a musician. My sister is a teacher, but she's a very fine flautist.
Right.
So we all played something. So we grew up playing things. Yeah. So I played clarinet. I bugged my mum and dad to get me a saxophone when I was about 14, so I could play Careless Whisper. That'll tell you when it was.
Fantastic.
All those. Well, in the 80s, of course, every pop song had a saxophone on it.
Of course it did. Yeah.
From the 90s onwards, that was replaced by a string quartet. But in the 80s, it was a saxophone. Yes. And so, obviously, growing up with that music, you wanted to play saxophone, and then through that, really, I got listening to saxophone players and got into jazz. I remember sort of discovering Stan Getz records.
Right.
And I'm often saying this to students. Of course, this was in the pre-internet days, where if you wanted to buy a record, if you wanted to know a record, you had to go down to the record shop on a Saturday afternoon. Two
buses, and then
exactly
2 hours and trying to find a record and come all the way home and you still haven't got it. Yeah, you have to go back next week and try again.
But you knew the record because you listened to it, over and over again. So you got to know things. Then when I was sort of took it seriously from the age of I always played, and I played right through school. But I left school at 16 to go and do an A-level course and a music foundation course at Harrogate College of Art and Technology, which was where my mum taught. She taught art there. And it was the best thing because there was this music. We were just suddenly doing music all the time from age 16.
Yeah.
And there was an American teacher, an American clarinet and saxophone teacher there, called Cecil Gold, who was sort of transplanted from New York to Harrogate, North Yorkshire. He found himself in the Yorkshire Dales, having come from the skyscrapers of New York and being a professional musician there. And the reason he was there was because there was an American air base near Harrogate that his wife worked at. And so he was there, and he managed to get some work at Harrogate College, which was exactly the time I went there.
Oh, how amazing!
Suddenly, was
fortuitous
clarinet and saxophone lessons from a New York professional, and that's really when it sort of started getting serious.
What a wonderful experience! Yeah, so I mean, I can imagine. Yeah, that as a teenager, what a brilliant thing to be exposed to. Yeah,
it was amazing. It was an amazing opportunity that. And from there, then auditioned and went to the Guildhall, Studied. I did a classical course there actually with John Harle, who's a very eminent saxophonist.
Yeah.
Because I mean, at that time, I was interested in all that aspect of playing. Actually, I mean, it's part of me. I do the whole classical thing as well. I used to. I sort of listen to it more these days. But at that time, there wasn't really a jazz undergraduate course. There was one at Leeds, which was a historic one, and that's been there since the 1960s. With a very fine course, jazz course. But I wanted to be in London, and so I moved to London and did that. But got very involved in the jazz department while I was there. I was playing in the big band at the Guildhall with Scott Stroman when I was there, and I was having jazz harmony lessons with Lionel Grigson as well. So I was sort of involved in both sides really, in both the classical and the jazz side once I was there. So
because the Leeds was the only place you could do a jazz degree for a very long time, wasn't it?
For many years. I mean, people did their undergraduate at Leeds,
and then came to,
and then went and did the postgraduate at Guildhall.
Guildhall, yeah, that was like a sort of pathway, wasn't it? The only choice for a long time. You know?
For a long time until the Academy, I think, started their undergraduate course. I think they were the first in about 1990.
It's the 90s, and then they all started doing the undergraduate things, didn't they? I think Guildhall was quite late on that as well. It was probably like late 90s, I think, when they were doing theirs. But
mid to late, I think.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and then Trinity started theirs, and so you know, it all sort of got going then. But at that time, the early one was you couldn't do it.
And of course, the thing for saxophone players is it's an entirely different art form, isn't it? What they call classical, which is a bit of a misnomer anyway, isn't it? Classical saxophone is an entirely different sort of aesthetic, a different technique, would you say? Certainly different sound, isn't it, to jazz? It's quite a very different approach to physically playing the instrument. So and obviously you have to dedicate a lot of time to that. So, you tend to pick one, people tend to go one way or the other, don't they, with that? So...
Yeah, I mean, I was always interested in jazz, but I sort of did that classical training as well. It's interesting with classical saxophone because it's actually a contemporary instrument. The saxophone is a true contemporary instrument because it's used in pop music, it's used in jazz, it's used in a contemporary context as well as a contemporary classical context, and so I think that feeds into the whole classical sound.
Yeah, that's a good point. But of course, it didn't exist either, did it? It was only the late 19th century before they invented it.
1850, 1852, about the 1850s.
So there's no saxophone in Beethoven and Mozart or any of that, is there?
No, absolutely not. No, not until... And even though it was invented, then, it wasn't really till the 20th century that people properly started writing for it.
Interesting. Well, look, we should play a track. So, what we're going to hear now. So you went to the Guildhall. You've done your training, and then you come out of there, and you're getting on and doing really well. And of course, you get your first band together, and you did this recording with Jackie Dankworth, which involved a co-collaboration on composing this piece we're going to hear. She wrote the lyrics, I believe, with you. That must have been a great experience working with somebody who, at that level already, at quite sort of out the gate for your first album as well. I mean, you got a great band there, lineup, and there's a lot of great players there as well. So Simon Pearson on the drums, great, and James Pearson on the piano, and Dominic Ashworth again. So you're really playing with some heavyweight players at this point.
Yeah, this was a few years after I left. I'd met Jackie through Mike Garrick's big band, actually, who did some gigs with him at the time. And I used to go and dep with that band at that time, and so I'd met Jackie, and I just thought she had a great voice, and it would just be really nice. A lot of that album actually is wordless. It's my compositions, and a lot of it is wordless vocals. So I just called her up. Actually, I just plucked up courage one day and gave her a ring and asked her if she'd be interested to do it, and she said she'd love to. So we did a couple of rehearsals. This song that we're going to hear is the one track on that album that actually has lyrics, and it's we went to see a film called Il Postino. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, it's lovely, that, isn't it?
Film.
Yeah.
And I'd written the melody to this tune, and Jackie said, having seen that film Il Postino, would you mind if I wrote some lyrics? It'd be really nice to write some lyrics to that tune.
Beautiful.
which is what happened. So I said, of course, So she wrote some lyrics, and that's how this tune came about.
Wonderful. What a great story. So this is and this is from the album's from 2000. The album is called Changing Fortunes, and it features yourself on baritone and soprano saxophones. We've got Jackie Dankworth is singing on this track, Dominic Ashworth on guitar, James Pearson on piano, Dave Jones on the double bass, and Simon Pearson on the drums. And this is Where the Rain Falls.
Touched by the darkness, she turns to find a shadow standing there, silently moving towards her. He weaves his deadly flowers through her hair. The dreams that have eaten her heart away are calling her gently, come dance and play. And visions that filled her with love are gone. It's hard to tell just where the raindrops fell. Another springtime to heal a barren heart? Will it bring back love? All alone, touched by the darkness, she turns to find a shadow standing there, silently moving towards her. He weaves his deadly flowers through her hair. The dreams that have eaten her heart away are calling her gently, come dance and play, dance and play. And visions that filled her with love are gone. It's hard to tell just where the raindrops fell. Will there be another springtime to heal a barren heart? Will it bring back love?
Wonderful. What a beautiful piece of music. Congratulations, Mick. Absolutely stunning that. Yeah. Yeah, I can picture the El Postino scenery now there. Yeah. And Jackie Dankworth there on the vocals and lyricist as well, writing the lyrics. Wonderful. And so this album is from 2000.
That's right, on Black Box Records. That was Chris Craker's label.
Great. And that must have been a great experience working in the studio with all those guys. Did that band stay together very long? Did you work? I mean, I know some of the people you've worked with a lot on and off, but that's a fairly regular lineup.
I think that band stayed together for 5 or 6 years. We got together a few years actually before that album, and then we recorded that album 99 2000, and then we stayed together a year or two after that. So yeah, we did a few things with that band.
Is that the Mick Foster group? Was that the Mick Foster?
That's the Mick Foster group. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic, wonderful. So we're gonna change tack a little bit now. You've selected another piece because I think you're an incredibly versatile musician, and you cover a lot of all woodwind. You've got the whole classical background and the jazz thing, but you're probably best known amongst jazz audiences for where you do a lot of regular guest appearances, where we've played together as well, through playing your baritone saxophone, and you've just got a fantastic thing going on with that. You just have such a wonderful sound, and playing with that. I guess we would say mainstream kind of swing, just regular swinging music, and we're going to hear a bit of that now with this track On the Sunny Side of the Street. And I just wondered how you felt about when you're playing in that scenario versus playing your own music with your own band that you've composed. Is it a kind of conscious thing where you have to like put another head on, or is it just that being in that scenario it kind of pulls something out from inside you, as it were? Is it? I mean, because it's so natural. You sound so perfectly fitted into that style and that sound when you play in that way.
I think as musicians we're all influenced by what we take in, and of course I love that whole, I love Stan Getz, I love Jerry Mulligan, who became a massive influence on me. I mean, the whole baritone thing really started, I think, because I was playing baritone in big bands.
Right.
It maybe in the Guildhall Big Band,
right,
at that time, and I was playing baritone in those bands, and so naturally you get into the baritone solo thing, and you start to listen to people like Jerry Mulligan and Pepper Adams and Serge Chaloff, people like that, and it was really the melodic approach of Jerry Mulligan that hooked me into that type of baritone playing. So I started to, I was listening to a lot of that. I love those tunes. I mean, I love jazz standards. I was encouraged very much. I always have done gigs playing jazz standards and always loved listening to people play standards, and enjoyed that whole tradition of the scene, which in this country we've got a really good tradition of people playing jazz repertoire. Yeah. And I've always loved that part of the scene, and I've always loved tunes. So to be honest, my approach to those tunes when I'm improvising, I don't think it's wildly different from when I'm playing originals. I like to think I compose quite melodic original compositions. So it's really still a melodic approach. It's just the material sounds different. So I don't think I approach them in a wildly different way. Although I might play a little bit more vocabulary. I might play a few more phrases that are sort of more out the tradition on standards, because that's where you hear it. That's kind of where it fits. That's
the language of that music.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the language that you're communicating in with the other musicians and with the audience.
And there's something about, because correct me if I'm wrong, for like when I think of baritone, I think for me, I tend to hit my sort of take on it is they tend to fall in two categories. You get that real kind of honking kind of like sort of like thing, and then you get that very, very light bouncing along the Jerry Mulligan thing, which really swings, and I think that, I mean, they're both great, of course, but like that lightness of the skipping along to hear such a big instrument played in that way. I think this is something very effective, and there's something about the sound there, isn't there? And you've got that really down. I mean, it's, you know, you sound like you, because, and there's a few players I think that do that very well. Of course, where Karen Sharp was on recently, and I think Derek Nash as well plays beautifully on the baritone. He gets that lightness. He plays quite differently when he plays a baritone to when he plays tenor, I think. Do you find that? Do you find that when you switch horns, it brings something else out in that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I'm more of an E flat person, so I play baritone, I play alto, and those.
Okay.
Funnily enough, having said that, I play soprano quite a lot of my original compositions.
That's interesting.
Tenor's the one I've always thought I played less on. I think that there's so much history with the tenor sax, and there's so many people you can sound like, and I've never quite worked out where I am on the tenor. Having said that, I played tenor with Mike Garrick for years, and I remember having a conversation with him and saying, "Look, Mike, I don't really feel that comfortable. You know, I'm more happy on baritone or whatever." Of course, Bob Mackay had the baritone chair in the Mike Garrick band at that time, and he was Mike's long-standing baritone player. So, you know, there was no question of that. I used to go in depth for Bob now and again. But the chair came up on tenor, so for years I played tenor with that band. And I remember saying to Mike, I don't feel too comfortable with it. But Mike always said, you know, well, I quite like it. You know, I like your tenor playing, and I think you just stick with it. And Mike could be, you know, I mean, Mike was, you know, he had his own opinions on things, and he was quite firm about it actually. And so I stuck with it. And so I stuck on tenor in that band. And then now with the Humphrey Lyttelton band that I do, that's as you know, it's a tenor and baritone chair.
Right.
So it's the two. So I'm playing more tenor probably now than I've played for years and years. I'm really enjoying it actually. I enjoy doing it. But for me, the baritone has always felt home. It's always felt where I can be original, and where I can just relax and be myself.
Well, you sound absolutely wonderful on there, and let's play a bit of that. This is from the album you made in 2012 with the same quartet that we heard the live album, and this is an album called Four Views. It's on Hainault Records, and it features Dominic Ashworth on guitars, Tom Farmer on double bass, and Tristan Mayo on drums, and we're going to hear you on your swinging, beautiful baritone saxophone on the sunny side of the street. I hope you're enjoying the show. I just want to take a moment to tell you about a new way that you can help support me do this, and that is through patreon.com. That's right, I've got an account now, so the link's below here, patreon.com Buster Birch, and if you go along to there, you can now make donations by Visa credit card, so you don't have to use PayPal if you don't want to do that. And the advantage of Patreon is that once you do it once, it will automatically deduct on a per show basis. So instead of having to fill in the forms every week, if you want to make a regular donation, then that will just automatically deduct straight to your credit card each per show. And that is hugely helpful to me because it means I know that I've got a certain amount coming in every time I do a show, and that really helps me plan ahead and keeps the viable sustainability of the show going. There's two levels of sponsorship. There's my silver and gold membership. All of my Patreon supporters will get a big thank you personally from me live on the show, and the gold member sponsors will get an additional Spotify playlist which will be sent to you each week. It's something that I'm putting together. It's personally curated by me and will feature lots more albums by the guest artists each week. So it's a great opportunity to get to know this music much better. If you're really enjoying the show and you like the little tasters that you're hearing, that's a great way to get to know this music even more and enjoy in full comfort the full sound of the full albums. Thanks very much. Back to the show. Yes, that's right. Back to the show, and we are live streaming on YouTube with my guest Mick Foster. Wonderful baritone playing there, Mick. Absolutely beautiful, really swinging, and just got that classic jazz kind of modern jazz baritone thing going on with a nice swinging, bouncing along beautifully. Which always, I don't know why, I'm always sort of amazed that such a big thing can sort of just swing so effortlessly. Does it take a lot of more air to blow it, do you think, or is just getting it working?
Not really. I mean, it's a big instrument, but a lot of the baritone soloists, if you listen, they often play in the upper sort of octave and a half of the baritone, and that's where it's at its most mobile. And so you do play down the bottom, but you don't play as down there as much as you play in that upper octave when you're soloing. When you're in a big band,
that's
you're
where it's all at.
Utilizing a lot of that low register. That's what you want to hear.
Tower of Power and Ronnie Cuba and all that sort of stuff down the bottom. Yeah,
exactly. But especially if you're going for that light sort of dancing type baritone sound, you tend to use the upper octave or the upper octave and a half, upper 2 octaves, something like that. So you know it has that lightness. And actually, the baritone, funnily enough, it doesn't have the projection sometimes that a tenor has. So you blow it quite gently, and it has this sort of quite gentle projection. It doesn't have the sort of wide cutting sound that a tenor or an alto has. It can really be quite gentle.
And so presumably, if you're up the top end of it, you've got a lot of the notes are open, are they, at the bottom? So would that work?
Yeah, no, that's right.
So the sound comes out through the keys, doesn't it? A lot of it doesn't go out through the
holes open, yeah, and a lot of the sound, absolutely, as you say, comes out through the keys as much as the bell.
Right, fantastic. Oh, fascinating. And I couldn't help but notice here on this on the album notes, you mentioned that you play the C melody saxophone on that record as well, which is quite interesting. That's not that popular now, is it? Of course, Frankie Trambauer used to play it, didn't he, with Bix, Spider Bet, but it kind of fell out of. Any thoughts on that? Why are there not more C melody saxophones around, do you think?
Well, the C melody was popular in the 1920s and 30s. And it was popular because it was in C, and so people didn't have to transpose. I mean, when the sax was first invented, people don't know this, but there were lots of saxes. There was a C sax and an F, C and F saxes.
And F?
And B flat and E flat saxes. And the C and F saxes were designed for the orchestras, and the B flat and E flat saxes were designed for the bands.
The marching bands. It was outside. Was it a military?
Band. French military band.
Yeah, because they couldn't get enough volume from the clarinets. Is that what kind of how it came about?
It was a different sound. I mean, you still have clarinets in military bands, but it was a different sound, and it was a more absolutely, like you said, it was a more projected sound with a brass body and a reed and a cane reed, and so the B flat and E flat saxes took off. They became popular because they were the band instruments, and they were the instruments that were picked up by the jazz musicians.
Of course,
it's a great jazz. But the C melody sort of had a resurgence of popularity in the 20s and 30s because it was in C. Of course, this was the time of pianolas. This was the time when everyone had a piano or a pianola at home, so you could play along.
Yeah, and using the same sheet music as the piano. Look over the pianist's shoulder.
Exactly. So you wouldn't have to transpose. And they became very popular. And as you say, Frankie Trambauer was a jazz exponent of the C.
Was it the Gene Goldkett Orchestra? That was it, wasn't it? Yeah.
And Rudy Wiedoeft, he was another very more of a sort of classical virtuoso, if you like, or popular music virtuoso. So they were popular, and then they fell out of favour. Really, the altos and tenors took over, so they had. Consequently, a lot of people have them in their lofts. You know, they sort of got put in the loft in 1932 or something, and not taken out since. So you find them, and they're often in really not very good condition. But I happened to be at a woodwind shop in Oxford, and the guy there, Roger, said you might want to have a look at it, and it was in really good condition, this C melody. And then I had Phil at Lewington's do it up. So it was in even better condition, and it just plays really, really nicely. Instrument from 1924, and I just got really into it. So I take it on jazz gigs. I play the odd tune on it. I quite enjoy playing it, you know. So I thought it would be nice to do it. So I did do a tune on that album on it, yeah.
Fantastic. And there's a picture of you there with a big. Is it a bass saxophone as well? With the 20s bands. Which band was that? It was not Alex Mendham, is it? The one
that particular band was a band put together by Simon Whiteside, and that was to play at a party at the top of the Shard. It was hilarious. I had to sort of get that up the Shard, that bass sax up to the top of the Shard.
Get the bass sax up the Shard. That sounds like a euphemism there, mate. That's careful.
But I got into the bass. Through a band called La Banda Europa, which is an amazing thing. It's a Celtic orchestra put together by a Scottish composer called Jim Sutherland, and it's 35 musicians from all over Europe playing instruments. You get a hurdy-gurdy quartet from France and a nickel harp quartet from Sweden,
Amazing.
Galician bagpipes from Spain, as well as Highland pipes from Scotland. All these sort of interesting things together. And he wanted a bass. He decided he wanted a bass saxophone. So I got the call for it because I was a baritone player. I didn't have a bass at the time, but I borrowed one. And then I got into it. So I bought I managed to find a bass and bought one, and really and got into that whole thing.
And is the bass? Sorry, folks, but is the bass? The bass is is that a C instrument, or is that a B flat?
But bass is B flat. So it's
B flat.
Octave below the tenor.
Octave below the tenor. That's it. Yeah. Great. Wow. Fantastic. Amazing. Yeah. Wow. So, well, look, let's play another record. So, we're going to come back to the live album now and play another track from the Live at the Vortex. And this is a beautiful ballad, Sea Change. So, is this one of yours as well, Mick?
This is an original tune. I originally wrote this for big band. Actually, this was a band. This was a tune originally written for the London Jazz Orchestra.
Right.
And which play at the Vortex once a month in normal times.
Yeah, we played a little bit of the London Jazz Orchestra with Scott Stroman was on the show, one of the early shows, and so people can go and check that out if they want to. And this is a very long-standing kind of group of featuring some fantastic London jazz musicians, but it's got that very idea of it. It's a kind of composers group, isn't it, where people bring along charts and arrangements, and you play a lot of Scots tunes, but it's not all Scots tunes, is it? So there's a tradition there.
It was originally formed in 1990, and Kenny Wheeler was an early member of it.
That's right.
Van Saltzman, Pete Sabaton, all these great Pete Hurt, all these great classic British composers, and it was a workshop band where people could write things and bring along and get them played, and exactly in that way. You know, about 10 years after that, when I joined, I did the same thing. I started writing for big band and taking compositions along to that band. So Sea Change, that was a composition I originally wrote for that band, and then adapted it for a small band because I thought it would work well in the quartet setting.
Well, it certainly does. And this, we've got to give a shout out to Dominic Ashworth on the guitar here. Features a beautiful guitar solo from Dominic. So this is a lovely ballad. It's called Sea Change, and it's from Live at the Vortex, which just came out last year on Hainault Records. Absolutely beautiful. That was my guest Mick Foster on the soprano saxophone, and original composition called Sea Change, which features on your new album, Mick, Live at the Vortex. And I'll put the links below. I think your website's in there, so if you want to see more about Mick, presumably they can get that from your website. Yeah. Can they, Mick? Great.
Absolutely, from the website or from Bandcamp or any of the usual places.
All good stockists, as they say. Yeah. Yeah, they used to say, yeah. And I mean, it's a truly remarkable recording for a live album. It's an absolutely wonderful sound you got there. And it wasn't until the clapping comes in at the end there, I suddenly remembered that it's a live album. It almost sounds canned, the clapping, because you're getting such a beautiful sound. But it's wonderful playing, Mick. And I mean, with your soprano playing, I kind of feel like I hear a little more of your kind of classical side of your sound there. Is that fair to say? Is that something that you're conscious of, or do you feel that the soprano brings a little more out of that in you? Because you've done so much classical music as well. I mean, we talked a lot about your jazz. Perhaps we should mention a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the soprano, I think, lends itself to more of a classical sound. A lot of saxophone repertoire actually is written for soprano. A lot of classical contemporary repertoire is written for soprano. So I think that purity of the sound.
That's it. Yeah.
I think it does lend itself to the soprano. The sort of sweetness of the sound.
Yes.
I mean, I do projects that are influenced by classical music. I mean, I have a duo that I play with my partner Meng, and she's a classical piano player, and we have a saxophone and piano duo that we do pieces, and we do sort of more traditional pieces like Bach and Ravel and stuff like that, and some contemporary things that I've written myself for us, and contemporary composers such as Izzy Barrett has written a piece for us. I mean, I work with Izzy in a band called the Meinrad Eaton Quartet, and that's sort of straddles really classical and jazz music, and I think a lot of the sort of modern jazz, especially modern British jazz, there are classical influences in there. There's all sorts of influences with the younger musicians.
Yes.
As well as Izzy's projects. I've been involved with Laura Jurd's Human Spirits
Well, we
in the
just
Spirit
saw a
project.
picture. You won't have seen it, but that was the last picture, and I was going to ask you about. There's a picture there from Fleece Jazz Club, I think, with Laura Jurd, who will have to get on the show at some point. And I say we. I always do that. We. I mean me. It's me. Like as it was this big corporation.
The
Yeah.
organisation.
Yeah, I'll get my people to talk to her people. Yeah, it'd be lovely to speak to Laura because she's a very interesting musician, isn't she? Great composer, and like you say, a lot of influences. And I think young musicians are very open, aren't they, to very broad influences as well, aren't they? And
well, I think there's a tradition actually that goes right back. In this, I mean, we talked about the London Jazz Orchestra. I hear a lot of those compositions. I mean, if you remember Pete Sabaton, the piano player,
of course,
in that band,
yeah.
and I mean, really anything went for him.
Yeah, wonderful player,
in terms of influence. And then, there's a tradition of musicians who aren't necessarily just jazz based. It's all sorts of influence. I think goes into British composers.
Well, that's a very good point. And I think the thing about British jazz as well is because although there's the whole American tradition of what we know as jazz, but then there's this whole European movement of music as well. And I think there's a lot of that comes more from folk music as well as, traditional British and British jazz musicians there can be that influence from that side of things as well as the classical music, as you say, as there's this whole kind of rich heritage of classical music, and I think some musicians kind of lean a little away from the American thing almost as well, don't they? There's certainly, and of course then there's the whole free playing thing as well, which is very big in British jazz, isn't it, as well? Very
much so. There's a big tradition of that going back to the 60s. Of free players. I mean, you might not even call it jazz. You just sort of
music.
Call it free music, can't you?
Yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it, when you think of the European influence, the ECM sort of influence, if you like, and the American influence, and then where we are geographically, we're right in the middle of those two. I think that's reflected in the music.
Absolutely, music. Yeah. I think John Paracelli refers to it as un-American activities. Which is that McCarthy kind of thing. He's got it makes a great sense of humour. Yeah. John Paracelli was on my show, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to check out John Paracelli, do check him out. He's a very interesting musician. Yeah, un-American activities he calls it. Yeah, that European leaning. And so it's a good point, Mick. We kind of we've got all that going on, haven't we? So it's fantastic to hear your music and to hear all that you. I think it's fascinating. I think you represent that breadth absolutely beautifully, and you sound like yourself, of course, as well. And it's and everything you do is always of that incredibly high quality as well. So
it's very nice of you to say, Buster. Thank you.
It was great. Well, I'm glad we had this time to sort of. Share and thank you for coming on the show and sharing your music. We've got a few minutes left, but we're gonna play out with another track, and we're gonna go back to the Four Views album from 2012, and this is the quartet with Dominic, Tom, and Tristan, and we've got this beautiful samba, which again features another stunning guitar solo again from Dominic, as well as yourself on the baritone. So
I should just say actually about Dominic. I mean, he's a long-time collaborator. If just got time. We met at Blackheath Halls years ago, and we had a 10-year residency playing in a vegan restaurant in Deptford, long before such things were trendy. It was a great. We had this fantastic residency, and we got a lot together actually. Well, I certainly got a lot together.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Yeah. Well, this has come up often on the show, and it's like these long-standing musical partnerships that we find that people have. When we're talking sort of decades of regular playing together, and when you find someone that you have that kind of musical kinship with, it's really quite special, isn't it? And I think there's something about jazz that does that as well, isn't it? I think that you've got to connect with the person. It affects the music, the outcome of the music, because you're creating the music. You're not playing a fixed part, are you? You're playing off of each other, and so there has to, when you find someone that you have that connection with musically, it's usually, you also find that you're usually very good friends as well, and it's lovely, isn't it? And then combine that with years and years of slogging away in vegan restaurants for hours and hours every night for years on end, then it really comes through in the music. It really pays off, doesn't it? You can't. There's no shortcuts, are there, to that? You can't get to that level without doing that time on the boards.
And I mean, there's no substitute for playing. And I mean, when we think about the players that we listen to, the Americans who were playing night after night,
yes,
every night. I mean, I might play 2 or 3 times a week in normal times.
Yeah.
But those guys were out playing every single night. And
2 or 3 gigs a night. Yeah.
2 or 3 gigs a night, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then jamming when they'd finished.
Yeah.
You can't substitute that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it comes through in the music, that connection that you and Dominic have. I think it's great, and he is, of course, a wonderful player, as are you. And it's been really, really lovely to share your music and to show that kind of the breadth of what you do as well, and how that kind of your output and your compositions do shine through with all your influences there. So yeah, well, I hope to hear more. Have you got anything? Is anything coming in at the moment? There's a few green shoots showing through. I just got a call today for something. So how's that looking for you at the moment?
Yeah, I've got actually got a couple of gigs next week. I've got something at the Belvedere. Do you remember the Belvedere, which is a Chichester hotel near here?
Yes.
Phil, he's starting stuff up. So I've got a quintet gig there with the Essex Jazz Quintet with Paul Higgs.
Great.
Alan Barnes has got something coming up in June with the Plus 11. We're up in Sheffield.
Oh, is that his new suite, or is that something else?
No, that's the Plus 11, which was a sort of nod to Art Pepper, but they're all Mark Nightingale's arrangements.
Oh, from the 1959 album, his birthday thing. We played some of that. He was on recently, actually, just a couple of shows back. So, that's good. Oh, well, do check that out, folks. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. So I didn't realise you were on that. That's
I'm on that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, fantastic.
So 1 or 2 things, and then a couple of things with my own bands. In the autumn, we've got a gig at the Vortex, and I'm up at Birmingham Jazz, both at the beginning of October. So a couple of things. I'm hoping a couple more might materialise as well around that time.
Great, and that'll all be on your website, which the link's below.
Yeah, so. I'll keep it. It's not at the moment. The website gigs page, funnily enough, has been rather quiet for the last year. But
I've forgotten the password to log in to update it. Yeah, have to get that all reset. So little use it's had. Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. I've got to do mine as well. Yeah, yeah. Oh, blimey, great. Okay, Mick. Well, look, thanks again. It's great to see you, mate, and thank you for sharing your music and for this evening. So, folks, don't forget, if you have enjoyed the show and you have enjoyed the music, then please do consider a donation. Anything you give is much appreciated and is shared with the guests. We just split all the donations here, and you can get all the links for that from where is it? It's there. There we go. From there, Virtual Jazz Club, busterthebirch.co.uk, Virtual Jazz Club. Everything you need is on there. There's links to my PayPal. There's links to Visa one-off donations, and there's links to my Patreon subscriptions. So if you want to do that, that would be great. So up next week, I've got the amazing Spike Wells, jazz drummer extraordinaire, absolute legend of British jazz. He's worked with everyone. Was Tubby Hayes, his drummer, Peter King, Ronnie Scott. So lots of great music and stories to look forward to for that. And do look on my website. I've got a few more great guests booked now for the next few weeks as well. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you for all your lovely comments in the chat box. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you to my guest, Mick.
Thanks, Buster. Real pleasure.
And we're going to play out with Samba d'Orfeo, which is it's a Louis Bonfa tune, is it? Am I right?
Yeah.
And it's a classic sort of standard samba. And this is from the live album, Live at the Vortex, featuring my guests, Mick Foster and Dominic Ashworth, Tom Farmer and Tristan Mayo. Thanks, everyone. Good night. See you soon. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.